Is your Switch 2 going to break? That's basically what some people are expecting to happen. And it's all because of these little connectors where the Joy-Cons actually attach to the Switch 2. Because everyone is saying they're going to snap off way too easily. So is it really that big of an issue? Should we all be concerned? Well, to answer that question, let me introduce Hendry and Crazy Hendry here to answer that exact question, among others, about the Nintendo Switch 2. Because as you can see, we have one! Alright, it's not actually a real Nintendo Switch 2, the colors are a little off, but the form factor and size should be practically identical to the real thing. So we're going to use this to answer some very important questions, and I think this can be very insightful. But first, I have to give a quick shout out to the accessory manufacturer iVolar, who sent us this amazing mock-up along with a case for it and of course the actual Switch 2, and I have to say this thing is extremely well built. Just listen to this. That is quality, and it should protect your Switch 2 from any harm that may come its way. So if you want to grab this case yourself, you can use the link in the description below. And if you're watching this video, you can get half off that case. I believe that's $15. I will be using this once the Switch 2 actually launches. Anyway, so with that out of the way, let's get back to the question of whether the Switch 2 Joy-Cons are going to snap off the connector on the Switch 2 itself. Because even though this is just a mock-up, these Joy-Cons actually disconnect. In fact, they reconnect magnetically, and I have to tell you, this already is super satisfying. So I'm really excited for the final product, as it's way better than sliding them on, on the current Switch. Anyways, point is, if we look on the Joy-Con itself, you can see the slot where that connector will go. Now, even though our mock-up doesn't have that connector because it's part of the internal hardware, I can already tell you we don't need it to tell this worry is completely bunk. You don't need to worry at all because of how these actually connect. In that connector is actually recessed within the exterior shell, meaning that in order for this Joy-Con to actually interact with it, to connect with it, it needs to first start slotting into the exterior shell, which will then automatically put that connector in the exact right place. There is no way to manipulate that connector without fully disconnecting the Joy-Con, because as you can see, this can't fit in without being perfectly flush with the system. In fact, even if I pull it out as far as I can, and jostle it around, it's barely moving at all. And that's even at a point where the connector probably isn't even connected to the Joy-Con anymore. It's probably already disconnected by that point. Meaning by the time you fully pull it out and you have any range of movement, you don't have to worry about it. The only real ways I can possibly see any harm coming to that connector is, for one, if you somehow drop it without any Joy-Cons attached so that it's exposed at an angle onto something small and hard enough to snap it off, which seems extremely unlikely. Beyond that, the only possible use case scenario I can see where you may cause some damage or there's the potential for damage is if you slide the Joy-Cons in at an angle like this right into that connector. I guess if you somehow mistake it for a Switch 1 and try to snap it on that way, but again, even that seems unlikely, and I would be shocked if that connector is really even all that fragile to the point that sliding some plastic into it causes any serious harm. But that is the only way I could see it, is if you slide it in rather than just attaching it organically, like it's meant to be. And as further proof of this, Nintendo's been basically using technology like this for over 30 years. Because take the Super NES, for example. It has the exact same design with a connector on the interior, which then it connects to the Super NES itself, which is in this case being fulfilled by my Super NT, and bam! I have never heard of anyone breaking that connector. I'm sure it's happened, but I've never heard of anyone breaking it, but it's basically impossible, because the cartridge is made to fit within that shell before the connection actually happens, meaning you never actually have enough leverage at any point to break the connector, because it's always safely within the shell before that connection actually happens. And this was the case for other Nintendo systems too, like the Nintendo 64, look at that, and to a lesser extent, the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, among others. So now that we have this almost one-to-one mock-up of the Switch 2 itself, I want to do some other fun things with it, like for instance, doing a size comparison. So here is the original Nintendo Switch, let's put it right here, and you can see how much bigger the Switch 2 is by comparison to the original. Even if we bring in the OLED, look at that! OLED's on top, obviously the smaller one compared to the Switch 2 on the bottom. Now my camera angle may be throwing off a little bit here, so let's go and put them side by side, so you don't get a distorted perspective. And look at the size difference, not just in the screen, but the Joy-Cons themselves as well, which we'll talk more about in a second. For another comparison, let's bring back in the original Switch. There we go. Look at that. That is a massive screen size improvement, along with, once again, the Joy-Cons. And let's bring in all three. Here we go. You can see all three. So again, the Switch 2 is pretty darn big by comparison to the others. And I think that is going to be really important when it comes to the Joy-Con. So let's go ahead and focus on that again here. Because I have to say, from playing around with my mock-ups of the Switch 2's Joy-Cons here, these are considerably more comfortable than the original Joy-Cons. Because again, look at that size difference. It is pretty substantial in a few different ways. But the base feel of it is just better. It is bigger and it's more comfortable to hold. I don't feel like I'm cradling it nearly as much as with the original Switch. I feel like I'm actually holding something closer to a proper controller. Now, obviously, this is still a far cry from a full Pro controller, but I have to say, or I have a feeling your friends are gonna be a lot less annoyed with this version compared to the original, especially because look at the size of those triggers now. The SL and SR buttons are so much bigger than before. Than these tiny little itsy bitsy ones that were almost impossible to press unless you use the wrist strap accessory. Now you no longer seem to need it because these just feel, again, way better going by my mock-up. So again, big win for the Joy-Cons. They really just improved the design based on this, and I'll compare it to the other one here as well. Again, I love how those snap off. And yeah, this just feels so much better. The only slight issue I might have is that it just now feels like the buttons are even closer to the control stick now, even if that's not actually the case. It does kind of like just feel that way with how they're so far removed from the right edge. Beyond that though, I think these are much more comfortable overall, and I think people are gonna have fewer issues with it compared to the original Joy-Cons, especially if, let's hope, they fix that drift issue on the joystick. Now, before we wrap it up here, there's one more thing I want to test out real quick involving the Joy-Cons, and that is, as you may have guessed based on the little pad here, the mouse functionality. Yes, this is an original Super NES mouse, because as a trailer finally confirmed for the Switch 2, the Joy-Cons will in fact seemingly act as mice. They even had a little cute snippet in there where they're like racing along with little mouse tails. Now, we don't of course have the wrist straps that they had in the trailer, which may make it even better, but I do want to test how these feel being used as a mouse, much as I did already in a video based on the rumors where I used the original Joy-Cons as mice, and as it turns out, this was surprisingly comfortable. People doubted it. People were like, Nintendo would never do that, and sure enough, they are. And again, based on my test of the original Switch, I was happy with how this felt, and as it allowed you to access everything on the Joy-Con already, including the joystick and buttons, with a surprising amount of comfort, and even slid around surprisingly well, again, without even using the new wrist straps. So, let's try that again using my mock-ups of the new Switch 2 Joy-Con. So let's go ahead and remove both of these here, although we'll be using the right one because we are right-handed, and again, as we now know, they both have the mouse sensor, which will be right there. So anyways, let's go ahead and try the right one, and wow, first of all, I have to say, right away, this already fits your hand even better than the original. Let me see if I can turn my hand a little bit like this so you can see better. And yeah, this already feels really quite nice. I am actually shocked how good this feels. I wish you could better see this right now. Like, that's how I'm holding it basically. And it glides around, again, quite smoothly. Again, though, this is a mock-up, so it may change a little bit for the final product. But yeah, it feels comfortable. I can easily reach the buttons at the least. The joystick is a little trickier. I do have to move my hand down the controller a little bit, as you can see here. So I feel like my grip does adjust a little bit, so the control stick is maybe not quite as nice, but you probably won't need it because you have a freaking pointer in your hand. Now you have your left hand free to use a control stick while you use a mouse with the right one, and god, this is freaking amazing. I can already tell this is going to be such a great way of playing games, at least, at a desk. But let's try the left one. I'm not left-handed, but let's go and try how this feels. I have to say, actually, what's interesting is this solves that control stick problem, because now the control stick is a more natural position. My thumb naturally rests there, whereas the buttons are a little harder to press compared to that. So there may be a slight difference, depending on whether you're right or left-handed. But maybe Nintendo can work around that some way in which whichever hand you're using, it's going to work out fine for you. And there's also the possibility of using both hands at once. Can you imagine that? A dual mouse game? I have no idea how they would actually do this, but hey, anything's possible. So using both right now, again, I am really surprised by how well this feels. Obviously, it's not going to match, the exact ergonomics of using a proper mouse, but I have to say, for something you're going to have on you all the time, this is pretty darn good. And I wouldn't be surprised if they allow you to use a full proper mouse instead. But again, knowing you're going to have these built into the system, everyone's going to have 2 sets of mice, meaning you can play 2-player games even, and you both have access to mice. That is really cool, and that means more developers will support it because everyone has it, and that opens the door to you possibly using your own, your actual own mouse, like my Super NES one here, if you want those, full-on ergonomics. Again, Nintendo's not confirmed that. We don't know for sure if they will allow that, but even if not, I am happy with how this feels. This is shocking how good this feels. Try it yourself if you on your own current Joy-Cons, then imagine how much better it'll feel with an even bigger Joy-Con. And again, that's without the wrist strap accessory here, which will add even more, a little bit more height to it and might even improve the glide motion. But again, I'm happy with how this feels right now. So all things considered, I have to say, based on what we've seen in the trailer for the Switch 2 and playing around with this nearly 1-to-1 mock-up, I am pretty happy with how this is as an upgrade. Yes, it may not quite have, the surprise we typically do for a Nintendo console, though that mouse feature may get pretty close, to some degree at least. It really depends on how they actually end up using everything. But if you just look at this in terms of taking what was already a great product and improving it, this really seems to be a pretty bang-up job. In that the screen size is fantastic, the Joy-Cons are more comfortable now, they seem to be better, the mouse functionality is fantastic, and yeah, there we go. And I love how they connect and reconnect now, or how they disconnect and reconnect, I should say. That is fantastic. In fact, when we try connecting both Joy-Cons at the same time, so let's line them up. We'll tilt the Switch up a little bit, and bam! I love that! That is so freaking cool! 2 Joy-Cons at once with minimal effort. It almost feels like snapping a Kit Kat. You take it, you snap your Kit Kat, give one to a friend. I'm not joking. This is cool. This is so much cooler when you actually try it yourself rather than, just seeing it in a trailer. Again, not a game changer when it comes to actually playing games, but in terms of just like the look and feel and just how streamlined everything is, oh, that's fantastic. I love that. Okay, before we wrap it up here, I did want to address one other final possible concern, and that's because after I showed the opening of this video with the Switch 2 falling apart and exploding to a few people, they had the thought that what if you managed to disconnect both Joy-Cons at the same time? Would that cause the Switch 2 screen just to fall to the ground? So I wanted to tackle that head on real quick, and I don't think it's a big worry for a couple of reasons. One is on the final production unit, the final retail unit, you're going to have to hit these triggers to disconnect both Joy-Con, which is, an extra step to make it even more difficult. Second, even ignoring that, or even assuming you are doing that, in order to disconnect both, the odds of that happening are extremely low, because as soon as you start pulling on one, well, you lose all your leverage on the other, meaning it's basically impossible to disconnect both at the same time because you have no leverage to do it unless you're holding onto the system itself as you disconnect both, like I'm doing right now. That's the only real way to do it. So, and even doing that, yeah, you really have to concentrate and focus on doing that, and it really makes it a lot more challenging than you'd think. So I don't think that's an actual concern. I don't think you need to worry about it. Anyways, everyone, that is Handray and Crazy Handray's take on the Switch 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and do you have any other questions about what we have here, about this, mock-up of the entire Switch 2 and the Joy-Cons. Again, thanks to the accessory company. I got so many things on my desk now. Volar, which again, you can get this case for half off right now using the link in the description below. Check it out. I am so happy with this case. It is really freaking cool. I can't wait to use it in my actual Switch 2. Again, you can see more of it here. And you can see just how well the Switch 2 will fit inside it. Bam, look at that. It's perfect. And that is a well-made case. No worries about your Joy-Con connectors being broken in this thing, for sure. Anyways, everyone, thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for more on the Switch 2 from us. Let us know if you have any questions again in the comments below, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I don't know what my hand's doing right now, but click the thing. That's what I'm doing. All right, bye, everyone. Bye.